What we rarely ask is, if we don't do this now, what might be the consequences?
Yeah.
We don't usually create an awareness around the consequences of stalling decision making.
Do you wonder how trailblazing leaders sense at scale, evolve to innovate, and align the actions in this increasingly digital world? Welcome to the Exploring Leaders podcast. The experienced team at Digoshen interviews leaders from around the world for insights and inspiration on how to lead in the digital age. In this episode, Digoshen founder Lizelette Engstem, who is also an independent board chair and director, researcher, author, and advisor, asks the questions.
Warm welcome to Beyond the Old Playbook, which is a podcast within the Digoshen Exploring Leaders podcast, where we explore when leaders have to navigate without actually knowing the answers or even having experienced that very much before. And this episode, we're going to focus on how do we exercise judgment when every available choice has a downside. And to explore this, I'm delighted to be joined by Rolf Pfeiffer. And Rolf is an experienced business leader, chairman, executive coach, whose work has spanned international businesses for a long time. You are also the co-author of My Prism, Override Your Autopilot and Choose Mindful Leadership. And you're also starting your next career around actually pursuing a PhD. Can you share anything? I'll say first, warm welcome to the podcast, and then maybe you can share something around what the PhD is about.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Lizelette. It's always a great pleasure to be in conversation with you, and hopefully there will be a few inspiring moments for our listeners. Well, the topic in one line is how to craft a rewarding post-executive career.
Right.
So it's for those people who have decided, I'm okay with my full-time executive role. I want to reclaim control over my calendar. And then what?
Right.
So that's really what that observation inspired that interest. And maybe that's even something where you say, whatever the options are, each one comes with a downside. So maybe it's something that fits right into the topic of conversation today.
Indeed. And I want to showing you a thing, which is done by Kandinsky already in 1923, which is interesting. And it's called Composition 8. And it's quite a colorful painting with a lot of different angles and circles and things. So I wanted to start with, when you look at this painting, what draws your attention first? Complexity or tension, or do you see balance? And how would you describe in your mind the elements here?
What first drew my attention was the big circles in the upper left-hand corner. The first was, well, this is the sun, and maybe it is, and maybe it is not. But that drew my attention. And then I realized with all these, no wonder he called it, because maybe it's 7 or 9 or 10 or 5 or whatever, but it's interesting that it doesn't have a title like paintings would have a titles. But then, of course, it's Kandinsky, it's 1923. You look at the story, the history, what is the setting in which this has been created, and you get, okay, fine. But the real thing that drew my attention most was that there is an energy that leads to the upper right-hand corner of the image. And the upper right-hand corner in our culture, in whether it's Sweden or Germany, where you are based and where I'm based, or in other European countries, we design things from left to right.
Right.
And it's leading into the future, because the upper right-hand corner, the right-hand side is where the future is, in this logic, and the upper right-hand corner is something uplifting. There is something, maybe there is a degree of messiness, and then, but it moves into the upper right-hand corner. So it will be good at some stage, or it will be better at some stage, is to me the main initial association.
What a wonderful exploration of this, and how well it actually fits into our topic. So
I'm surprised.
So I want to start with actually exploring this thing that as leaders, we often feel that we want to have the right answer. And what is that based on? Why do we do that?
Well, I've learned from one of my coach friends and colleagues, Francesco, it always goes back to the mother, which of course is not true, but that there is a grain of truth in it. Many of us have come up through a society that places a lot of value on,
Right.
and whether that's in, let's do a test. When someone says we do a test, it automatically triggers yes, no, pass, fail, right, wrong. Life isn't a test. And therefore, we often are imprinted by that idea of right and wrong, but life is a bit more complicated than just
Indeed.
right or wrong.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it probably comes from, and this basic desire of doing things right or doing things well. But then, of course, very often that's just futile.
Yeah. And I wanted to connect with your wonderful book that you and your colleagues were writing about overriding your autopilot. And I'm kind of thinking how well that fits with our discussion then. So what is your experience in our search for certainty, how it influences our leadership decisions?
Well, on the one hand, when it says overriding the autopilot, means for an autopilot to be overridden, there must be an autopilot in the first place. And most of the work we do, most of the things we do, most of the decisions we take are actually being taken on autopilot. It's like, the very simple example is, imagine you're in the bathroom in the morning, you start to brush your teeth. Which hand holds the toothbrush? Do we think about it? No, we don't. We just do. And it'll either be left or right, whether we're lefty or righty. So in other words, the idea of making decisions consciously, which would then also say, okay, how do I do this? And maybe there are opportunities and there are options. I could do it this way, the other one. It requires us to put a lot of energy into it. And because the main role of the brain is to conserve energy for the moment when the saber-toothed tiger comes around and wants to eat us. I've never met one anyway, but that's another story. That is, we conserve energy and therefore we use patterns.
Yeah.
And if those patterns are, you better get this right, well, we operate the pattern without us knowing. Posit that it's not a conscious search for certainty. It is an uncaught autopilot behavior.
Yeah.
Without us even questioning whether certainty can be reached.
Right. And as business leaders, we know that basically all our business decision is made on hypothesis. There's some kind of hypothesis. And we try to collect insight so that we try to take a decision towards the right. When do you feel that it's time to stop gathering information and move forward with it?
I didn't find the article anymore, but there was an article about a very well-known physicist who described how he comes to a mathematic formula when you have an optimal result. If I find it, I will provide the information. Maybe we can give it to listeners. But I find that the most simple approach I have worked with to try and find out when does the amount of new information that comes in when does it slow down? When does it become a trickle? As opposed to flow of new information.
Yeah.
And once it goes from flow to trickle, I say, okay, stop it. Let's make a decision and move on. Because
Right.
the variation
Yeah.
from the 8th or the 9th or the 10th is like in the PhD, in the qualitative research, they say in some articles, we wanted to interview 20 people,
Yeah.
but after the 7th interview, we didn't get any new information anymore.
Right.
Information that we had heard previously was repeated.
Yeah.
And I've read that 3 or 4 times. So I
Yeah.
would imagine that like 7 out of 20 is probably a good idea. So 7 out of 20, what's that? 30 something percent?
Right. I think this is really interesting. And since we both were also work on boards, I think one of the kind of angles that I'm trying to push into my own boards is that the decision we're about to make, is it irreversible? Or can we change us?
Yeah.
And I think that is also telling us that we can go ahead because we're not going to be stuck.
Absolutely.
We haven't invested all of this money on a mine that we can't get out of or something. We can still move on.
That's what I was going to say. If you have to allocate a billion, whatever your currency is, to something, you better want to make this a proper, good, solid, well-prepared decision.
Yeah.
Because once you say, okay, let's go, you're probably committed.
Yeah.
But what if you use the process for allocating a billion when you allocate a million?
Yeah.
It's probably not useful. And that's where, this autopilot behavior comes. Let's find an approach that's suitable for what's at stake, and not something that's way bigger.
Right.
I think that's
I
where we
link
can deal with that degree of what is the level of uncertainty we can accept. And like one of my friends who's a trained journalist said, it's better done than perfect.
Yeah. Which is something you can say to all of your fellow board members and to your children as well.
I mean, the thing you can ask then is, if we do this now, what might be the consequences?
Yeah.
What we rarely ask is, if we don't do this now, what might be the consequences?
Yeah.
We don't usually create an awareness around the consequences of stalling decision making.
Right.
I rarely hear that conversation.
Yeah.
But that would be the conversation that will need to happen.
Yeah. And I think it's particularly valuable for leaders and boards at this current situation, when everything around us moves very quickly. Do we have the luxury of exploring all of the details in such a manner? So I wanted to move over to these things about trade-offs. And how do you see that leaders navigate situations in where you have several real options and they compete for your attention? What do you see we can learn from that?
Well, one thing is a bit building upon what I said earlier. If I have 3 or 4 options, what I usually do is I say, well, what would be the value of realizing this option? What would we obtain if we did this? And we do that for A, B, C, and D. We should place equal attention to saying, well, what do we not get if we do A, B, C, and D? So always look at this from both angles. What do we get and what do we not get if we do this? And then see, if we look at the total analysis of that, what to be a good way forward? And what might be implementation risk associated? Maybe there's a moderately good option with very low implementation risk, and then there is a fantastic option with big implementation risk.
Right.
Maybe have that come into the equation as well. Maybe it's only a back of the envelope calculation. Maybe it doesn't need a big financial model, but those would be things that I would always want to see as being part of the conversation before a decision gets made.
Right. I think that a couple of the areas that a lot of the leaders and anybody are struggling with right now is a lot around tensions. So around growth versus resilience, around innovation versus risk, or short-term performance versus long-term value creation. What is your experience about balancing those tensions?
I would like to first start replacing a word, versus.
Right.
By saying, what's the balance between these two things? Because if these are extreme ends of something, they must be linked. So where do we place ourselves on this journey between growth and resilience?
Right.
Whatever the two things are. And so it's, to me, it's a what's the balance between, or what's the both and, rather than the versus. So at the very simple linguistic level, you can already change the way you look at things. And the other is, there is this great concept of polarity thinking, which essentially says, we've got this and we've got that, but what's the way to bring these together? Which is, in essence, this idea of, if we do this, what have we got? If we do this, we don't do that, what do we lose? If we do this, what do we get, and what do we lose? And then you create the total. And that is what I think is really important. So always start with, don't use versus, use what's the balance between.
Right. I think that's an excellent suggestion. And it also gives for a good communication vehicle between people. Because naturally you will have positions in both angles, but you don't discuss where you end up in between.
There's something else. Very often when we use these big words, growth, resilience, whatever the words are, I find that very often you have 8 people around that everyone says growth and resilience. Do we know that they mean the same thing when they say growth or when they say resilience? So what does the Venn diagram of the definitions of growth of these 8 people look like? Is it a good overlap or not? So I find that very often it's important to say, when we use these big words that everyone uses, what do we really mean by them? Before we move on and make this, balancing decision of what does it look like. I find that often gets overlooked. And I always get surprising faces when I say, what do you mean by growth? What do you mean by resilience? What do you mean by whatever the word is that we use? Can we get clarity on the concept? It's almost like in PhD you say, define this, define that, and can we agree on the definition?
I think it's an excellent, also a bit of a negotiation with other people about what we should look at. When you have these situations, you need to make decisions. How do you decide which considerations deserve a greater weight in particular situations, and what's your experience in that, and what have you seen?
I think it's very much what you said earlier, irreversible. So what do we think is the point of no return? And do we have clarity what the consequences are of us doing this or not doing this? And I think it sits very much there, where I'd like and say, what might be the consequences of doing this, not doing this, what are the, and then how do we navigate that? I think that's really the key, the point of no return. Do we have one? And if so, how do we navigate it?
And now I'd like to take it over to a question that I actually find few people who would be so good in actually answering these, both because you have a lot of experience, but you also have a lot of focus on research. So the question is around what distinguishes judgment from analytical decision making?
Well, the way you did lead into this leads me to say no pressure. To me, it goes back to this beautiful statement. I forget who said it first. It's usually attributed to Einstein, but it's incorrect. It says, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So analytics to me is what that can be counted. And judgment is beyond what can be counted.
Right.
And judgment is, I compare the result of analysis to my own patterns, to my own experience, to my own knowledge, to everybody else's patterns, experience, knowledge, taking the famous step back and say, what do you see?
Yeah.
It's like in the Kandinsky painting that we looked at. What do you see? Analytically, we see lines and arrows and circles and what have you, but what's the meaning we give to those lines and arrows and circles and triangles and quadrangles and whatever?
Yeah.
And it's really that idea of when we go beyond what we see and move to what does it mean to us? How do we make sense of this information? That's to me where we move from analysis to judgment. So in other words, judgment would probably be possible without analysis. It's probably going to be better with analysis.
Yeah.
Can you make a decision based on analysis without any judgment at all? Yes, of course. Might it end up being the best decision that could have possibly been taken? Perhaps not.
Right. I love that comparison that you do on the balance between the analytical and the judgment. The interesting thing that I need to explore with you, and this also goes into your PhD in some ways. You know, if you have worked in a lot of business settings and a lot of human interactions, you have some judgment. And sometimes it benefits you and sometimes it challenges. But what do you understand around judgment in that sense for you, who have been in all of these different roles? And how has your evaluation around judgment matured?
Well, I certainly trust my gut or my instinct, which of course is not analysis a lot. I have come to realize that I'm probably pretty good at spotting patterns. And as a result, that makes me rely more on what I notice and gut feel and what I observe, how people show up and how they communicate. And then analysis is a nice added angle to it.
Yeah.
But it's usually not the main I trust when it comes to the big decisions, because the big decisions will always involve significant emotion. And to analyze emotions is a lot more difficult than to analyze numbers on a spreadsheet, on a P&L, whatever. And so I do a lot more of that now than I did 15, 20, 25 years ago. So yes, it is something that has matured over time. At the same time, I know that because I'm human, I carry loads of biases, which probably impact my judgment,
Right.
either positively or negatively. I know that my judgment is nothing more than my judgment. And maybe if other people are involved, they might have a judgment too. And then what's the common denominator? Because even if I'm a board chair, I'm only one of so many others.
Right.
I may be the person that they eventually look to say, now, okay, we've got all these things. What do we do?
Right.
I'm sort of respectful of everybody else's judgment enough and humble enough to say, well, it's just one judgment among many.
Yeah.
And how do we make it our judgment and our decision?
Right. And one of the challenges as board member is that you are often selected because of something you did. But now we're all kind of moving into more and more uncertain territories with our businesses. So what role do you feel that experience, reflection, and self-awareness plays in judgment?
If I can put it into hierarchical order, awareness before self-reflection, and then at quite a distance, experience.
Right.
Because experience may be super helpful.
Yeah.
And it can also be the exact opposite of super helpful.
Yeah.
Where awareness is more an idea of what do I notice, how do I on, what might this be a sign of, and then self-reflection, how do I process that information? And yes, of course, experience may be helpful until it is no longer helpful.
Yeah.
And of course, we never know which bit of my experience is helpful and which bit is not.
Right.
And of course, when this is tied to technology, it's pretty easy. So knowing how to send a fax in the very late 1980s was great. It's irrelevant today.
Yeah.
But then, of course, there are other things that may not be going away as quickly as some technology. But still, having an experience may be helpful and it may not be helpful. And the thing that will help me understand where it is probably awareness and self-reflection, which is why I would put these way ahead of experience.
Right. And I think that is so interesting because we both for ourselves and the people we meet, the experience. Probably because it's a bit harder to actually penetrate and understand without spending time to understand their judgment and their ability.
It's the fundamental dynamic in any change situation. What you might have to give up can be pretty easily described in great detail. What you will get in exchange is a lot more difficult to describe. And it's a lot less credible because we don't know whether we may have a level of probability, but we don't know whether what we want to happen will in fact happen. So in other words, it's like driving your car. We can decide, do we look through the windshield at the road ahead, or do we look in the rearview mirror at the road that we have traveled? And of course, we should have a good balance. But of course, it's very clear that it's a lot easier to be aware of the journey we have done, and so much easier to say, oh, we know all of these things because of our experience, but we don't ask often enough, what does the future require? And we should ask that question a lot more of. We should be spending so much more time asking what the future might require than what we have accumulated in the past.
Right. I think it's wonderful because that leads into the kind of closing question that I just have to ask, and that is that if you could write another chapter in your fantastic book, My Prism, what would you write it about?
Well, because the book has been written in 2021, 2022, I would write a chapter on what we have learned since we wrote it. So what have the past 3 or 4 years taught us? Looking at life through this lens and saying, what have we learned? How has this been useful? Where has it helped? Where has it not helped? So what have we learned would be the title of the chapter.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Rolf, for sharing these insights. And we'll also make sure to mention both your book and your LinkedIn profile. And maybe we can hope to be able to follow your your PhD findings here. And I'm delighted. I mean, we're connected through Harvard and the Institute of. We certainly follow each other, and which I think is really valuable. I think one of the things that you also do more about now is trying to find out who is learning something that you're interested in, and that you can piggyback a bit quicker and draw into your own things. So we like to leave the listeners so they also have something to ponder until we meet them next. And in this case, we think that the question needs to be something around which decisions are you postponing right now and still hoping for more options without a downside? And should you, and is it irrevocable, or should you actually take a decision now? So that is what we would leave them with. Thank you so much, Rolf.
Thank you very much, Lieselot, for having me. It's been a great pleasure, as always, to be in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Exploring Leaders, a podcast produced by Digoshen with the ambition to inspire insightful leadership in the digital age. If you found this episode interesting, join the momentum to amplify the voices of trailblazing leaders by sharing it with others for inspiration. For any questions or recommendations on other inspiring leaders you like to listen to, contact us via our website, digoshen.com, or via social media as LinkedIn or Twitter.